They say some places never forget pain. In the quiet hills of Louisville, Kentucky, there stands a building that time itself seems afraid to touch. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium, once a place of hope, now a monument to despair. At the beginning of the 1900s, tuberculosis swept across the United States like a silent, invisible storm. People called it the White Plague. There was no cure, no real understanding, only fear. Families were torn apart overnight. To stop the spread, the sick were isolated far from towns and cities. In 1910, Waverly Hills opened its doors to those fighting for every breath. They believed that sunlight, fresh air, and rest could heal them. The sanatorium sat high above Louisville, where the winds were clean and the fog rolled through like ghostly waves. For many, it was their final view of the world before death. Inside, the halls stretched endlessly, lined with white beds and weak, coughing patients. The doctors did what they could, but medicine was limited. Some treatments were desperate, even cruel. Ribs were removed to help patients breathe. Lungs were deflated, and surgeries often ended in screams that echoed through the corridors. By the 1940s, it was estimated that over 60,000 people had died there. The staff stopped counting. The hospital became a place where life and death met every day, and the line between them blurred. They built what became known as the Body Chute, or the Death Tunnel, a long underground passage leading from the hospital down the hillside. Its purpose was to transport the dead discreetly, so the other patients wouldn't see. Each day, gurneys rolled down the tunnel carrying lifeless bodies, their faces covered with sheets. Workers pushed them silently, their footsteps echoing off the concrete. Today, people who visit the tunnel report feeling sudden drops in temperature, as if a cold breath moves across their necks. Some swear they've heard gurney wheels creaking, even though the tunnel has been empty for decades. And then there's room 502, the most infamous room in the entire building. Legend says that in 1928, a young nurse was found hanging from a light fixture in that room. She was unmarried and pregnant, something society of that time condemned harshly. Overwhelmed by shame, isolation, and the constant death surrounding her, she took her own life. But that wasn't the end. For years later, another nurse in the same room jumped from the balcony to her death. Ever since, room 502 has been the heart of Waverly's haunting. Visitors say they feel watched, even choked, when they enter. Paranormal investigators often report their equipment malfunctioning there, as if something unseen interferes. Some have captured whispers on recorders, soft, pleading voices saying, "Help me," or "Don't go." Others claim to feel hands on their shoulders or see a woman's figure in white moving slowly through the doorway, disappearing when approached. The children's ward is another place that refuses to rest. In one long hallway, people say a boy named Timmy still plays with his ball. He died at Waverly when he was only 6. Those who bring toys for him find them moved overnight. Sometimes, rolling sounds echo through the hall, and small shadows dart just out of view. One visitor swore they saw the ball roll toward them, then stop halfway as if someone invisible had picked it up. During the night, the entire building seems alive. Doors creak open, whispers echo down empty halls, and faint footsteps follow you no matter how still you stand. Some who enter describe the feeling of being surrounded, like unseen eyes are watching from every corner. Even skeptics leave shaken. Cameras capture strange mists, shapes, and human-like figures where no one stands. In one famous photograph, a dark silhouette stands in the doorway of the 3rd floor, its shape unmistakably human, but its presence cold and hollow. After tuberculosis was finally controlled in the 1950s, Waverly Hills closed as a hospital and reopened as a geriatric center. But even then, death never left those halls. Patients reported seeing figures at the end of their beds or hearing names whispered in their ears. By the early 1980s, the building closed for good. It has stood empty since, its windows shattered, walls decaying, yet its presence still commanding. Urban explorers and ghost hunters from around the world come to see it. Some stay for only minutes before running out, pale and trembling. One group reported that while filming in the old surgical ward, they heard what sounded like labored breathing and a low, guttural moan. When they played the audio back, a faint voice whispered, "Get out." Others claimed to see shadows crawling along the walls, lights flickering when no power source is present, and doors slamming without wind. The air is heavy inside, thick with the weight of years of suffering. Some even say the building itself seems to breathe. A caretaker once reported hearing someone humming from the 4th floor. Thinking it was a trespasser, he went up to check. But when he reached the hall, the humming stopped, and all he saw was darkness. As he turned to leave, he heard a soft voice behind him whisper his name. He never worked a night shift again. Locals say that on foggy nights, when the moon is hidden behind the clouds, you can see silhouettes standing at the windows, pale figures watching the city below. Some swear they hear faint coughing, the sound of rolling beds, and the cries of nurses calling for help. Even today, during ghost tours, visitors have fainted or felt paralyzed by sudden chills. One woman claimed she saw a man in a doctor's coat standing at the end of the hallway. He stared at her for a few seconds, then simply vanished. When she looked down, she noticed wet footprints leading toward her before stopping suddenly, as if he had disappeared into thin air. For many, Waverly Hills isn't just haunted. It's alive with energy that refuses to die. The suffering that once filled its rooms lingers, imprinted in the walls. Some paranormal experts believe the immense concentration of death left a permanent scar, a loop of emotion that plays over and over again. Others say it's not ghosts, but echoes, remnants of the past trapped in time. But no one who's been there ever doubts that something is still inside. Something that watches, something that remembers. And maybe it's not just the dead trapped there. Maybe it's the building itself, feeding on fear, thriving on attention, growing stronger with every story told. Because even though the patients are gone, the screams, the whispers, and the shadows remain. So if you ever find yourself in Kentucky and drive past the old sanatorium, stop for a moment. Look up at the long, dark windows. You might see a flicker of light where none should be. You might hear faint footsteps echoing in the distance. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll hear the sound of a ball rolling softly down the hallway. But if you do, don't go inside, because Waverly Hills remembers everyone who visits. And some say when you leave, a part of you never really does.
The air inside Waverly Hills feels heavier the longer you stay. The quiet is not empty, it's full, like a whisper just beneath hearing. Those who visit often say it's as if the building itself is breathing. The walls expand and contract with the night, pulling you deeper into its chest. The night shift security guards have stopped lasting more than a few weeks. They say the echoing footsteps that follow them aren't always their own. One of them, Mike, swore he saw a woman in white walk into room 502, the same room where, decades ago, a nurse was found hanging by a light fixture. Her death was never explained. Some say she took her own life after learning she had contracted tuberculosis. Others whisper that something else in that room pushed her to do it. When Mike opened the door, the room was empty, but the light swung back and forth above him, even though there was no draft and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The next day, he quit without collecting his final paycheck. Investigators from all over America have tried to document the activity in Waverly. Some carry infrared cameras, motion sensors, and digital recorders. The devices always pick up the same sounds: soft sobbing, distant coughing, and the echo of children playing where no children have been in decades. One group caught something far worse. In the hallway leading to the old surgical room, a deep voice whispered on the tape, "Leave now." It wasn't heard in real time, only on playback. That same night, the batteries in every piece of equipment drained instantly, as if something had drawn all the energy out of the air. At the bottom of the building lies the infamous tunnel, the Body Chute. This was where the dead were quietly transported to trucks waiting below, away from the eyes of patients who still clung to hope. Over 60,000 people died in Waverly Hills, and many of their bodies left through that tunnel. It stretches almost 500 feet underground, dark, damp, and heavy with silence. Those who walk it today say it's the one place where even the bravest voices go still. A paranormal team once tried to walk the full length, They made it only halfway before the sound of footsteps began behind them, slow, dragging, uneven. They turned off their flashlights to listen, holding their breath in the dark. The steps continued, closer, echoing through the tunnel. When they finally fled, one man looked back and saw a faint light floating in the darkness, like a lantern carried by invisible hands. No one knows what waits at the other end of that tunnel now. One of the caretakers, an older man named Harold, said he used to lock up every night at 9. One evening, he heard a child laughing from the 3rd floor. Thinking someone had broken in, he went upstairs with his flashlight. The laughter turned into coughing. Then the coughing stopped. When he reached the end of the corridor, his flashlight dimmed, and a small ball rolled out from an empty room, stopping at his feet. Harold said he kicked it away, and it rolled back to him, slowly, as if pushed by someone unseen. He never went back upstairs again. Locals say the children's ward is the most active part of Waverly Hills. Visitors report the sound of giggling, the sight of small handprints appearing on dusty windows, and toys moving on their own. A popular legend speaks of a boy named Timmy, who still roams the halls playing with his ball, waiting for someone to join his game. But there's another spirit less friendly. They call him the Creeper. He's said to crawl along the ceilings and walls, a dark shadow with limbs that move like broken branches. Those who see him often leave the building sick, dizzy, or disoriented for days. Some believe the Creeper isn't human at all, but something that feeds on the sorrow of the dead who never left. There are stories from nurses who worked there before the hospital closed in 1961. They claimed patients would speak to people no one else could see. One nurse wrote in her diary that a man in room 311 would point to the ceiling every night and say, "They're watching me from above." He died 2 days later, staring at the same spot. When the staff checked, they found nothing there, but the ceiling above that bed still stains darker than the rest, no matter how many times it's scrubbed. Years after the hospital shut down, a group of teenagers broke in one Halloween night. They took pictures, laughed, tried to scare each other. When they left, one of the girls noticed a figure standing in the window behind them in every single photo. A tall man in a dark coat, face pale and eyes hollow. He hadn't been there when they took the pictures. That girl never spoke much after that. The city tried to restore Waverly Hills, turn it into a museum or tourist attraction. Every time, something went wrong. Tools went missing. Lights flickered on after being cut from power. Workers fell ill or refused to return after hearing voices whispering their names in the dark. One man said he felt a hand grab his shoulder near the morgue freezer. When he turned, no one was there, but the pressure marks of fingers stayed on his skin for days. To this day, Waverly Hills stands like a scar on the hill overlooking Louisville. Windows are boarded, the walls are cracked, but the air still hums with a strange vibration, as if the thousands who died there are still waiting to be seen, still waiting to be remembered. Visitors come seeking proof. Some bring cameras, others bring courage. But those who stay too long say proof isn't what you find inside Waverly Hills, it's what follows you out. Sometimes they say you bring a piece of it home. A faint cough in the corner of your room. A whisper when you're half asleep. A shadow that doesn't belong to you. And when you look closer, you realize the halls of Waverly never really end. They just move with you, quietly, unseen, waiting for night to fall again.